Agriculture on the move.
Agricole mouvement.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole en mouvement.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole en mouvement.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole en mouvement.
Good day again, St. Lucia, and welcome to the program Agriculture on the Move. I am Phillip Sydney, your host. Our topic for discussion today is the Iyanola Project. Yes, you may be wondering, what's this? But with me are two individuals who are ably going to discuss and let you know what this project is all about. And to my immediate right is Miss Francillia Solomon, who is the Iyanola Project Co-ordinator, and she's attached to the Department of Sustainable Development. Next to her is Karlmonty Augustin, who is the Research Officer in the Forestry and Lands Division. Welcome to the program, lady and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Karlmonty, you are not new to this studio. You have been here many times, so I don't need to welcome you too many times. Francillia, as the project coordinator for Iyanola, let's tell St. Lucia what it is. What is Iyanola Project?
The Iyanola Project is one of natural resource management. The project seeks to sustainably and effectively manage the naturally occurring resources within the project area. By natural resources, we mean ecosystems, landscapes, seascapes, and the project area spans from Cape Estate in the north through to Mandeli Point in Dennery.
Okay. So, why the name Iyanola?
Iyanola was selected for a couple of reasons. One, mainly because Iyanola is the indigenous name given to the island of St. Lucia by the Arawaks because of the presence of iguanas found throughout the entire island. The St. Lucian iguana that is endemic to St. Lucia was rampant throughout. With the development of the island, the iguanas have moved to the northeast of the island, and that is the Iyanola region. And so the name Iyanola was selected for the project area. This is the last frontier, the last part of the island that the endemic St. Lucian iguana can be found.
Okay. So what's the overall objective of that project?
The objective of that project is in keeping with those of our project sponsor, the Global Environment Facility, GEF, and there are four main objectives: sustainable land management, sustainable forest management, biodiversity conservation, sustainable livelihoods with a focus on climate change.
Okay. So, forestry, you're playing a big role in this entire project. So tell us, what has forestry done thus far in that project?
Okay, well, I'll start from the beginning. I think some of the conceptualization of the project actually was done by past foresters. You mentioned the Iyanola region, which stretches from Point du Cap to the Mandeli Point. This area, yes, it is known for being the last home, you could say, for the indigenous iguana or the lizard. However, you have other endemics in that region, other wildlife as well as plant species of importance that occupy that region. So you have also the St. Lucia nightjar, which is a nocturnal bird. It is extremely rare. It is actually only found in that zone. People probably call it locally the Jack Papa Pow, right, because of the song that it actually makes in the night. You actually have a portion of the population of white-breasted thrasher being found in that region as well, among other species of wildlife, right? It is also an important nesting site for the leatherback turtles and so on, and some of the other turtles that will stay in our waters throughout the year, right? And as well as, it's a zone now that that's kind of tricky to think management, because by and large, most of the land in that region is actually privately owned. Right? So forestry involvement for us now is a situation where we have a legal mandate, that is lands that are vested to the forestry department, either in our reserve or forested crown lands. It is easy for us to actually go in and force our management authority and control what happens there. But in lands that are privately owned, the approaches to management is actually a lot different, where you have to think of also looking at the objectives of the landowners, because the landowner's objective may not necessarily be one that is in keeping with what we want to see. So we have to, it's basically we have to come up with new methods for managing private lands. But what forestry have done so far is we have been involved from, as I said, conceptualization of the project. We also were involved in conducting the assessments, both the floral assessment as well as the fauna assessment. Fauna assessment is just about to conclude at the moment. There were some points that was actually missing to be done. The floral assessment, I think we did something like 160 something points from Madeli region all the way to Point du Cap. So that will give us a snapshot as to what is happening. Are we seeing changes in the vegetation? Are we seeing degradation happening? Right? Are we seeing what is the population of our key species? Right? But as well as we have already started the process of restoration, even if it is not as quickly as we would actually like to see it happen. And the fact, as I mentioned, you're dealing with privately owned parcels, then there's always the situation of, we could have an agreement with you, for example, the landowner, we could do an intervention. But if the land is family owned, and then your brother decides to do an activity that may undo what we did.
But do you have problems in that regard?
Yes.
Do you then engage the private owners? As you say, he may have other plans for his land because it's his land, but then it also has an impact, on the environment, on the flora and fauna, as you mentioned. So how do you handle that?
It is tricky to actually handle that. So then we actually have been seeing that we have to come up with innovative approaches. Because guess what? I'm a private landowner. I want to use my land for my economic benefit.
Right.
A lot of times the idea of protection, the idea of saving or protecting certain species, I may actually see that as a competing objective.
Yes, right.
Right? So for us, you have a situation where we may come and we may make recommendations. But the landowner themselves may be checking, hey, I cannot really see how this is going to bring direct benefits to me in the short term, and may not necessarily support or heed it.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. I would like to add to that the project is at this time engaging some of these private landowners with a view to them volunteering their lands for protection.
Good.
Yes. And so these agreements, of course, needs to be mutually beneficial. We are negotiating with the landowners, especially those that are have all the endemic plants and animals that we're trying to preserve and conserve. And we are actively in discussion with them with a view to having a legal and formal agreement with them.
In a case where for example, this particular landowner, his environment really impacts on the species that you mentioned, both plant and animal, and he decides to go the other way. Is there some measure where government can come in and acquire that land to ensure that you maintain that environment?
Well, in our case, the project does not have the resources, neither the government, we were told, to acquire these resources. However, we are working with them, not just that they voluntarily do it, that they understand
Yes, yes.
why and the importance
of it, yes.
of the species that we are trying to preserve and conserve, not just today, here and now, but for the future generations.
For children, yes. Hold that point. We are due for our first break. You're watching Agriculture on the Move. Stay tuned. We'll be back soon.
Black Sigatoka is a fungal disease which affects the leaves of banana and plantain plants. It causes a reduction in the size of the bunch and the quality of the fruit. In commercial banana and plantain production, Black Sigatoka disease is controlled with chemical as well as non-chemical measures. Chemical measures involve the application of spray oil and fungicides. However, it is neither practical nor safe to use agrochemicals to control Black Sigatoka in backyard gardens. Non-chemical measures include good agronomic and cultural practices such as weed control and proper drainage. Affected parts of leaves should be pruned or cut off from the plant. Use a clean, sharp cutlass or knife. Infected leaves should be disposed of properly or added to a compost heap.
For more information on how to treat and control Black Sigatoka on your farm or in your backyard garden, contact the Black Sigatoka Management Unit at 451-5491, 451-5894, or email bpmu@candw.lc. This message is brought to you by the Ministry of Agriculture in collaboration with the International Cooperation and Development Fund of the Republic of China on Taiwan.
Welcome back to the program. Ms. Solomon, tell us about the duration of the project, when it began and when, of course, it's going to end, and if there's any, after it's ended, what happens next?
The project began in 2015. It's a 4-year project with, at this point, we are in our 4th year of implementation. We're trying to secure an extension to ensure that the recommendations from our 4 major consultancies are implemented, get a good start on implementation. As you would appreciate, projects do have an end, and the implementation of these recommendations after the project's lifespan will be continued by the respective project agencies. Our co-executing agencies of the Department of Physical Planning, Department of Sustainable Development, the Forestry Division, Fisheries as well as Tourism would be working on the different parts of the project recommendations.
What are the challenges in this project?
We have had quite a few. A major one for us was the procurement of 4 major consultancies, being the preparation of a land use plan for the entire project area, the preparation of ecosystem services valuation for the project area, which will, at its completion, give us a dollar value for the resources found within that area. That information can then be used to guide the decision-making process on the development needs for the project area. Okay. The 3rd project consultancy is that of biodiversity livelihoods, making sustainable use of the naturally occurring resources within the project area. The 4th one, planning and development policy, that seeks to effect changes to existing laws, propose new laws with a view to implementing the recommendations from these 3 consultancies.
Okay.
And so that one is on the back end when all the reports, all the recommendations are available. Yes.
With I've been hearing about the East Coast road stemming from
The north-south
the
link road.
north-south, yeah. How is that going to impact on the project?
At this point in time, the feasibility for the north-south link road came back negative due to excessive, well, very high cost. We pray that this remains this way. However, should things change and that road be reconsidered, it will have a negative impact on our work done by this project. The very species, the very landscapes, the very seascapes that we are currently trying to conserve and preserve will be affected by it. While we are very much aware and supportive of the development needs of the country, the need to have an alternative route to access the north, especially in situations of disasters where one would need to find alternative routes, that needs to be very finely balanced with the presence and prevalence of our endemic species. And by virtue of the fact that they're endemic, it tells you it can be found nowhere else in the world.
Yes.
So there is an impetus on us to ensure that all our actions are concentrated on preserving these species. So the very presence on that road, of that road, would need to be very finely balanced and done in a manner that is fully respectful of the species that are found there.
Carl,
and that's our faith.
that's very fair. Yeah, I can understand that. Carl, you go ahead, Carl.
Okay, can I just add that for the forestry department, we recognize, and as we said, there will always be competing needs for land, right? So we recognize for us, Iyanola now is a means for us to develop new innovative management approaches and techniques that can actually take into consideration the fact that there will be development as we move forward in the future. But how can that development now be one that is sustainable in nature so that the impact on the natural world is actually less, right? So if we can convince people that the value of the land actually goes up, if you can boast that you have endemic species there, being both plants and animals, then people will look at value from differently. Even if, for example, those people in certain areas on island look at the prospects of selling or developing for tourism or expats, these expats right now are becoming more environmentally aware.
Yes.
So the fact that you have indigenous species is something that they may be willing to pay more for. And this is one of the arguments that we say, that yes, you could have development is necessary. However, let us do a type of development that will allow for us now to save the patrimony, right? So that 50 years from now, even after all of us in this room have gone, that the St. Lucians can still talk about, hey, I'm going to see a St. Lucia iguana. Hey, the leatherbacks are actually nesting and so on. And if we can come up with means that generation after generation can make their living, their livelihood from the sustainable use or the leverage of those species, as opposed to eliminate them and look at only one type of development. This is what we're trying to push.
But thus far, I'm sure in your surveys you have recognized the degradation of lands in that particular area. What have forestry done thus far in the restoration of lands in those areas?
Okay, thus far, well, we have one. I would agree that we have noticed that there has been a lot of degradation. You have situations of shifting cultivation where people squat land, they plant one or two crops of short-term crops, and then they move to a new area and they cut a piece of forest again and establish, right, and do that. We also recognize that we have a serious issue with our riverbanks. And the Northeast Coast is no different from other areas on island where you have serious bank erosion and so on.
Carl, hold that point, because it's very important, but we're due for another break. Stay tuned. We'll be back soon.
All boats engaged in fishing must have a license to fish from the Department of Fisheries. As part of the licensing process, a fisheries extension officer must inspect the boat, the fishing gear and the safety equipment. The purpose of a fishing license is to manage the amount of fishing in our waters and avoid overfishing. This will help us continue catching fish. Every year, boat owners or captains must renew their license to fish. A licensed fishing boat must clearly display the J6 number assigned by the Department of Fisheries. That J6 number should be placed on both sides of the bow of the boat. The license sticker given for the current year should be placed on the left or port side of the bow. The boat owner must have permission to use any engine above 125 horsepower. The inside color of the boat must be painted one of the approved colors, signal red or international orange. The boat must have the necessary navigational and safety equipment as required by law. The boat owner must ensure that the captain and crew are registered with the Department of Fisheries. Any change made to your fishing operation must be reported to the Department of Fisheries within 7 days. Some changes include the color of the boat, the type and number of fishing gear, the engine size, and the name of the boat. The boat owner and captain must comply with all conditions of the fishing license. For more information on obtaining a license to fish, contact the Department of Fisheries at 468-4143.
Thank you for staying tuned. Carl, very quickly, prior to the break, we were talking about looking at the restoration of land degradation, and you were talking about the maintenance of riverbank.
Yes.
Can you continue, please?
Yeah, we were talking about the riverbanks. You have an issue where the riverbanks are degraded, but you also have an issue of illegal abstraction of water for irrigation and so on. And this now is actually lowering the amount of water in the river, thus impacting on the amount of water available for the riverine ecosystem to maintain itself, right? As well as people downstream now.
Aqualife too.
The aqualife. So things like the fishes and the crustaceans and so on you have in the river are unable to undertake their normal activities if the water levels are artificially brought down, right? So, but added to that now, I must say, we have done two sets of restoration, two approaches in terms of we have done riverbank, and most of the planting that we have done is trees of economic value. So we're planting a lot of tree crops, fruit-bearing species, as well as things like spices and so on. And we are also focused on a few native species, rare native species, be they fruit-bearing, as well as be they timber or importance for things like apiculture and so on. We have also done something like 35 hectares of other degraded passes. So we have done around 10 kilometers of riverbanks thus far. And we have done around 35 hectares of other land passes where we have planted a mixture of forests, both forests of economic value and native and some native species and so on. We have done a few cycles. We have done 3 cycles of planting as well as maintenance in order to have the greatest impact that possible, right?
Do you maintain the plants that are planted in terms of fertilization and
yes,
the general agronomic practices?
Yes, we do that. We actually do the maintenance involves things like doing the circle weeding and so on, and staking, and as well as some nutrient reinforcement, right? This is not done in all regards, because what we're looking at is to give these plants a chance to to reach a certain height so that they can no longer be impacted by weeds and so on, and they can easily be spotted by the landowners. So when they're doing the other agronomic practices, that they do not inadvertently kill these trees.
Okay.
Right? But we are doing that. And I must say that a lot of the work that we have done so far has been outsourced. So that now has ensured that project monies trickling down to the economies, the local economies, because you have 30, 40 people being employed every time we do a cycle of planting and so on. And for the farmers, it's beneficial because you are getting people to come and plant fruit-bearing trees on your land without you having to expend anything.
Yes,
Right?
I'm happy with that because years ago the forestry division was actually pushing a lot of timber varieties and species.
And then we have moved away from
and I'm happy you've moved away from that, and that takes us to the next step of livelihood, sustainability of livelihoods, by using, for example, we had this mango festival, right? And then you could see the many uses of the fruit, apart from, of course, its soil conservation qualities that it has because of the taproot system, but then you also have many fruits on your hands. So now we're able to show St. Lucia's what we can do. But there are other forms of livelihoods. Can you expound on that,
Yes, yes, we do have other forms of livelihood. As a matter of fact, our consultancy on biodiversity livelihoods recently completed, and some of the areas that we would now be venturing into include that of apiculture, beekeeping, with a total of 40 hives being done throughout the project area, with not just new persons providing them with the training and assistance to do it, but also providing mentoring from experienced beekeepers in order to sustain them. During that activity, we will be looking at the production of honey as well as beeswax.
Great.
Yes. Our second area would be that of latani, the latani palm, which we use to make our brooms, our local brooms. And
don't forget the wines too, eh?
Yes. However, our focus will be on the brooms in the first instance. Then we will develop further into the wines and other arts and craft. An additional area of sustainable livelihoods for the project would be that of cultural heritage, tourism, for tourism purposes. And during that, we will be working with the Cultural Development Foundation to train persons throughout the project area to put on 3 signature productions based on the history and culture of the different communities within the project area, with a view to, in the first instance, putting these productions on for locals and visitors alike at the Pigeon Island, as well as the Cultural Center, and further on to take these productions into the communities.
Good.
And so these, in the first instance, in the short term, will be those sustainable livelihoods that we will be pushing. We are, at this point, going to be preparing project proposals to prepare complementary livelihoods possibilities with the use of perhaps coconut oils, almonds. These are readily available within the project area, and we would like to provide additional opportunities for persons to be able to sustainably and gainfully be employed using these.
Good point. So I suppose you made your final point, Francillia. Karl, your final words, please.
Okay, for me, I would say that we're trying to push the whole idea of agroforestry, the whole agro-silvopastoral systems, where we say to farmers that, hey, a lot of times farmers do not remember that they do not have a an official pension system. So if you could plant a lot of fruit-bearing trees, even if you're old man and somebody have to bring you to the farm, you could actually still be earning money when you are no longer able to work as hard. So this is something that we're trying to preach to farmers and saying, hey, guess what? As a country, we need to feed ourselves.
Definitely.
And more people are recognizing that it is safer and better to actually consume local.
Food security.
Food security.
That's what we need, yes.
But at the same time now, we cannot preach food security and say we're buying local if there is no availability of the products that are needed.
Yes.
So we say in that Forestry Department, with the project, Iyanola Project, as well as other projects, we are going to be pushing the whole idea of planting more fruit-bearing trees. Tree food is one of the things that we want to see, right? And then if you actually plant all of those fruit-bearing trees and you say, hey, I can put a few bee boxes.
Put it there.
I put it there.
Complements it.
I could have some small ruminants within my
I know you want to talk a lot and give a little more information, but I think we have ended. We'll have a part 2.
Yes,
we must have that.
Yes,
so, Francillia, thank you for being here.
Thank you for
Karl, thank you again for being here, and I wish you success
pleasure.
in that project. And I'm looking forward to hear from you, maybe for the other phase of the project.
Yes.
Thank you for being here. You've been watching Agriculture The Move. Thank you for viewing the program. And remember, agriculture is our business. And of course, our resource, we need to preserve it for us now and for our kids to come tomorrow. Thank you again for viewing. I'm Phillip Sydney saying goodbye and see you again. Thank you, Francillia.
Thank you.
Karl, thank you very much.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole en mouvement.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole en mouvement.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole en mouvement.
Agriculture on the move.
Agricole en mouvement.